Hi, welcome to Garden Cafe. I'm Maureen and this is my Texas Zone 8B9A garden. Today is mulch day. My husband bought a dozen bags, huge bags of mulch, and sweet, offered to mulch everything for me, which I said, no. I have little seedlings, I've got bulbs, I've got things I don't want covered. So I know where things are and I know what I want to cover. Benefits of mulch are, number one, most important in Central Texas, is it helps maintain the moisture in the soil. It keeps it from drying out as quickly. Number two, it just looks pretty. It helps to frame all of your beautiful flowers in the garden. Now, this may take me more than a day, probably closer to 3, but I have tons of weeds that have started coming up. I just weeded a week and a half ago, but it's that time of year. So I'm going to go through and weed, and then I'm going to go through and add the mulch. I'm going to start at the front of the house, and I'm going to work counterclockwise around to the other side again. May take a few days. Needless to say, most of this will be on fast forward. Please enjoy. And the other benefit of mulch, which I should have thought of firsthand, is it helps reduce the weed growth, which is really very wonderful. I'm going to be using my handy dandy tool. Another thing you might want to check, I've heard using black mulch is not a good plan in gardens, something to do with the dye. I always use brown mulch just because I like the aesthetics of it a little bit better. But double check depending on where you plan on mulching, specifically what kinds you might want. Well, it started raining here yesterday when I got about 1/3 of my way through just the front swoop garden. I have so much to do. So what was originally a plan for 1 to 3 days may actually take 3 days to a week, especially with our afternoon rains. It's just that time of year. We don't get much water, but it does rain enough so that I can't videotape or work out here. counterclockwise direction around the house, as I said. The next section is the Mexican petunia fence, our garden. Now, for the most part, my dahlias are stealing the show, and the Rose of Sharon that I took cuttings from the front yard are awesome. But all of these Mexican petunias from this point all the way down the fence are going to be as tall as the fence. Huge, gorgeous blooms every single morning. So this is my Mexican petunia fence, even though they are the least imposing plants I have here at the moment. I'm going to start over here. not just the little sprinkles we sometimes get in the afternoon. This is, well, for us, real rain, which is fabulous for the plants. Um, the mulching is taking so much longer than I originally thought, but I will get back to it when the rain stops for more than a few moments. But I'm going to move on to other things in the house. If you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe, like, or share. It helps me to grow my channel. Have a wonderful day.